What's going on, you 3D modeling beasts? This is JL Musi. Welcome to my weird Maya 3D modeling tricks video. The reason I named it that title is because most of the tools that are pivotal in creating these effects are actually off to the side and are actually buried within different menus than most of your 3D modeling tools are within Maya. Make sure that you stay tuned till the end of the video where I use a really powerful trick that actually uses the power of UVs to 3D model. If you're new around here, please consider subscribing and hitting the notifications button as I do Maya modeling tutorials like this all the time. So without further ado, let's get started. The first weird modeling trick that I want to show is actually not even in the modeling module, but actually within Mesh. So for that, we're going to go ahead and jump here to this Mesh tab. Essentially what I'm going to create is a chain that we could actually add different type of links pretty much procedurally via Mesh, and it's going to be a really flexible workflow, and it's going to allow us to not only place these different type of links, but actually go ahead and model further details for further refinement later. The first thing that I want to do is actually create the curve, which is going to be the backbone for our chain. And for that, we're going to use a CV curve tool. So we'll go to create curve tool and then CV curve tool. We'll go ahead and jump here to the front. And I'm just going to go ahead and draw a chain. And then what I can do from this point is actually just duplicate this. So I did Control D here. And if we open up our outliner, we'll notice that we have two curves. So from this point, what we could do is just give this guy a negative scale in the X. So we'll put -1, and now this is flipped. We'll take both these paths, and I want to combine the curves, so I'll go to curves, and then I'll simply go to attach. Now this is one curve, as you see here. It will create a duplicate here and keep the originals, but we can get rid of the originals. And what we could do as well is take the control of vertices here if we really wanted and just scale these guys in like this so they're closer together. I'll go ahead and add a cube. And then we could also create a torus. And I don't have a shortcut for that, so I'll have to dig this out of the menu. So polygon primitives torus. I'll go ahead and just flip this over like so, holding down J, and then I can just scale this in. I'm pretty much, since they're going to be links on a chain, I want them to roughly have the same volume. And then lastly, I'll go ahead and get a cylinder, and I'll scale this guy down as well. And I will add a little bit of detail to each piece towards the end, but right now, I'm just getting a rough block out of different shapes. So I'll select this cube here. And we need to make sure that we are on this Mesh tab. So if you're not seeing this, just make sure that you're on the modeling standard workspace and click on the Mesh tab, and then you should have access to this button. So I'm going to click the button here, and you see that Mesh is going to add a couple nodes here in the background, but most importantly, this distribution is being driven by this Mesh distribute node. You see that if we play with a number of points, this is actually going to influence how many objects here we have. I'm going to leave that at 10. The next thing that we want to do is actually add a curve here. So I'm going to go back here to my Mesh network. You could actually get your Mesh network to show here. I have it hidden, so I can go to show objects. Just make sure that Mesh is selectable. So now you could access Mesh through here or via the attribute editor, either or. It's pretty much going to get you to the same spot. So we need a curve node here. So we'll go ahead and click curve, add curve node. And you see that we are right here within the Mesh curve node, but we don't have any curve inputs. So it's important here that you middle mouse click and now left click. If you left click here, you will lose this attribute here, and you'll have to pretty much hunt it down again. So I'll middle mouse click, drag, and basically drop the curve right here. We have to do a couple changes for this actually to wrap around the curve. The first step is go to the Mesh distribute, and the Mesh distribute is actually what's going to distribute your objects within a Mesh network. By default, this distance X is 20, and this is creating an offset that we really don't need. for this example. So we'll go ahead and put this to 0. And you see that it's already snapping to the curve. So what I can do here is actually increase the number of points. And you see that we will get more of these basically along this curve. Now, the problem that we also have is that we actually have to change some settings within the curve as well. So I'll go here to the match curve. I'll play around with the step. And you see that as we increase the step, it's actually increasing the spacing. Another issue that we're going to have is that that cube that we created is a little bit too big for this, right? So what I'm going to do is, and this is the great thing about a MASH network, it's that it's all procedural. So I'm going to go ahead and get this cube. Now by default, MASH is going to hide that primitive, right? So you see that it's grayed out. And if we hit 4, we don't see the cube. So we can simply hit H on that object and it'll appear again. And now, since these are instants across this curve, we can basically just scale this down to roughly the scale that we need. And then now I'm going to go ahead and add the other objects to this network. So I'll go back to my MASH network here and I'll access this MASH 1 repro node. And this one right here, this node is actually going to tell MASH what objects to use. So we want to add our other 2 primitives. So we'll go ahead and middle mouse click the torus onto this list. And we'll also do the same with the cylinder. So the problem that we have here is that these are not updated via our curve. And that's because we need one additional node, which is the actual ID node. So we'll go back here to the MASH network, right? And this is pretty much the home that you'll go back. Right here, we'll look for ID. So we'll add node ID and we'll click that. As soon as we add that, you see that our other objects are pretty much thrown into the mix. So one thing that I want to do here is the spacing is off because remember the cube we scaled down. So what I want to do in this example is actually scale both of these guys to match that cube. So I'll take my torus here, I'll scale down, and also we'll take my cylinder here and I'll scale down. And I pretty much want to use that cube as a volume for these examples. So I think that looks pretty good. Now you see everything fits nice. So let's go ahead and go on to shaded mode. Let's add a little bit of pop here, right? So what we could actually do is add a random color to this. So we'll go to MASH again and we'll add a color node here. And instead of white, we'll give this maybe a green color here. Let's make sure that we are on regular shaded mode. So I'm going to take this use default material off. You see that we get this green color. I'm actually going to just play with this. So let's go with this teal. And then the cool thing about this is that start adding random hues here, even giving it a random saturation. And I also play with the value random just to get more random values here. I like how this is looking. So the last thing that I want to do here is actually add a little bit more detail. And this is just going to illustrate the power of MASH and working in a procedural nature. And this is a great example because this could be a type of necklace, a chain, some type of decoration on armor. So this gives you a lot of flexibility here. So I'm just going to go in here and add a little bit of detail to these pieces. I'll go in here first and I'll just drop a simple bevel to this one. So I'll make sure that I'm here on wireframe on shaded and I'll unhide everything. You see that everything is applied here to all the instances. And I'll just go back in here and repeat the process of isolating each piece and adding detail. And here's our system, and we could always add more primitives to the mix. So I'll show you how to create one more and edit the network. So we'll go back here. Let's go ahead and create a cone here. We'll just shrink this down just to fit pretty much the volume again. And then from here, what you'll have to do is go to the MASH network, go back to our repro, and middle mouse click this cone. And one thing you'll notice is that it won't update. So what you'll need to do is actually go back to the ID and add one more number to it. So the ID knows to actually take it into account. So right now we have 3. If we bump this up to 4, you see that our cone will actually be thrown in the mix as well. So here's our finished MASH network. And if we actually needed to change the path, we could go in here and play with the curve, and our path will actually update as well. My second weird 3D modeling trick is one that involves taking a piece that's already posed, like this knee bracket, and what I'm going to do is actually set it up where I can model in the luxury of world spacing and actually set up a instance chain where I can only just model half. Then for those results are going to be actually updated on this posed piece. And why is something like this very useful? Well, a lot of times when we model, we finish our model, right? Everything's posed. Maybe we have transforms already frozen. So if I go here, you see that I don't have any rotational values, right? So if I wanted to actually update this piece, yes, I could model here, right? I could just take half of this and model in place. But depending on the complexity that I want to add, sometimes it's a lot easier to model a piece like this in the world spacing. And that's what we're going to do in this example. So the first order of business here is going to be to actually create an instance of this. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up my outliner here. And we see that we have this knee bracket. So I'll go to Edit, Duplicate Special, Options. If I reset this, it's by default set to copy, and I can set this to instance, right? So I'll go ahead and do duplicate special. This knee bracket too is actually the instance that was created. So I actually want to leave the instance here, and I want to snag the original. And for that, I'll just take this. I can go ahead and center the pivot and just move it off into place. And as we see, this piece right here is going to control this piece. So the next thing that I have to do is set this to world. If I bring up my channel box here, this means that my transforms were frozen. A lot of times when you combine meshes, these will get frozen, or if you go to modify and then freeze transformations, your transforms will be frozen as well. But sometimes throughout the modeling process, we tend to lose our transforms, and then setting things back to world can be an issue. But there is a nifty little tool that will actually help us in this process. So what I'm going to do, I already have a cube, which actually helps. And if we take a look at our shape, which this is actually important, we do have these flat faces that are going to help us snap to world. So when you use the snap together tool, these groupings can be an issue. So what I'm going to do is just make sure that this knee bracket is out of the group. So I'll middle mouse click this and just make sure that it's pretty much on its own. And then now we can go to modify, snap together tool. We can click this guy here, this face, and you see that the little arrow is going to be activated, right? So that's the face that it's using. And then it's going to snap together to whatever other face we select. So I'll select this face here. I'll hit enter, and you see that it snaps. So in order for this to work properly, we're actually going to need two axes, but we already have one out of the way, right? So now we could take this, right, that's flat on one axis. We can middle mouse click to just redo that last tool in that command. And we'll click this face, and now we'll click on the side of this rectangle. And if we take this, now this should be pretty much on world. And if I jump here to the front view, a good telltale sign to know that this is perfectly in world. Like this edge, you can't see anything behind it, right? So if this was skewed slightly, you would see kind of this double edge. So that means that this is perfectly on world, which is exactly what we wanted. So what I like to do at this point, this is pretty far from this piece. So what I could actually do is hold down V, and I just vert snap within the vicinity, and I know that it's somewhere close in 3D space, and then I can just create an offset here. And then I'll select both, do Shift I to isolate, and I can go ahead and model the changes. And I'm going to go in here and do Shift I on the front, and I have this front view where I can work with. So I'll quickly go ahead and do some modeling updates to this piece. So now that I'm done pretty much doing just my modeling updates here, I can see that this is updated. So I can go ahead and unhide everything. Everything's going to be revealed. The last order of business is to just mirror this in the world. That way I can preserve these rotates, and that way the clone or the instance could actually snap back to this other half. So I'll do shift right click mirror, set this on world, and you see if we did object here, we'll get kind of a funky result here, and that's why we need this to be on world. So on world, it's just going to be way off on this other side. Obviously, we could have just snapped this off to the world, but either or, we can just play with the offset and get these guys closer. If you really wanted this to be precise as far as an exact half, since we are fiddling around with the offset, we could just jump here to the front, and then we can take the merge threshold off so we get no merging of the verts, and then we could see the clear symmetry line. And then we could just do Control Shift just to play with the offset. And then once that offset is pretty much dead square in the middle, and I'm just holding down Control Shift just to get more gradual control. So that looks pretty good. And now we could assign a low merge threshold. That's going to be mirrored exactly half. And now this is pretty much perfectly placed. And we didn't have to do anything to this. So we can go in here, delete this piece. One thing that you might want to do, since this is an instance, you can go in here and do modify and go to convert. And then we can take this instance to object, and that's back to a polygonal object. Now this is a polygonal object here. Looks like we have a duplicate here. We could get rid of that. And now we could just go in here and just hit 3 mode on all these. And we have a nice updated piece that we really didn't have to touch. And we were able to model the updates just using the ease of world spacing. Last weird 3D modeling trick is to actually use UVs to model. Yes, UVs to model. So I'll go to create polygon primitives and use a plane. I'll go ahead and flip this guy over. So I'll hold down J to constrain to 15-degree increments here. I'm going to make this guy a flag here. And for that, I'm going to need more width. So let's make this 10. And then we'll make this guy 5. And we'll need quite a bit number of divisions as well. So let's make the width 100. See how that looks. I think that looks fine. And then this is going to be 50 to keep that ratio. We're going to need so many divisions because we're actually going to apply a deformer to this. I'll go in here, just make sure I'm wireframe unshaded, and I'll just move this up over the ground. And then I'll go to deform, and I'll add a Sine here. And the Sine's going to actually allow me to put waves on this. So what I'm trying to do is actually mimic a flag pattern. And then from this flag, we're actually going to use the UVs of this to actually be able to project some text onto an object that would be very, very hard to do otherwise. So I'll go ahead and take this guy and just rotate it, right? We see that it's basically moving here. So what we need to do is set this guy at 90. And you see that it's going to align 90 in the Y. Looks like it's going to align with our object. So let's go here to the inputs and start giving this some amplitude. You see that it's starting to work, right? And it's going to give us kind of this nice flag look. The thing that I probably want to do here is actually add more waves. So here, what I'm going to do is actually decrease the wavelength, right? So the smaller the wave gets, the more wave repetitions that we're getting. And I could probably bump down the amplitude a little bit, something like this. And maybe I'll play with the drop off a little bit as well. So this would be mimicking a flag. So I'm just going to go in here and actually add a lattice to further deform this. So I'll go to deform again, lattice, and just drop a lattice here. And on this lattice, I need to tweak this just a little bit. So I really don't need many divisions here. So I'll go ahead and just set that to 2. I'll increase this here in the X to 5. And in the U as well. And maybe I'll drop this down to 3. The thing about lattice is you don't want to get overboard with these lattice points unless you really need to. So once I have just the divisions that I want, I can go ahead and go to lattice points. And then this is going to allow me just to push and pull here, kind of deform this, give this more of a kind of flag look. All right, so I'm going to call this done here. So I'll take my mesh here, and then I'll just simply delete the history. You'll see that it'll take out all the deformers. So from this point, I just want to add some text here to this flag. So I'll go to create, and then we'll simply go to the type tool. So I'll go in here into my type 1. So I'll come up with something real clever and creative for this Maya tutorial. So I'll type in Maya, and yeah, that was kind of sarcastic, not that creative at all, but we do have some text. So we'll go ahead and need to scale this down. So I'll go and select this and just scale it. The other thing that I'll do here is actually kill the thickness here. So on this geometry node, I'll go ahead and just uncheck enable extrusion. And this is just going to be flat right here. The other thing that we want to do is make this deformable, since we're going to be basically deforming this onto this flag. So for that, we'll check deformable type here. And you see that it basically triangulates our mesh. And this is going to work well for the deformation. So now let's go ahead and look at the UVs of this. So we'll select both of these, go to UV, and then the almighty UV editor. And I'm just going to reselect these guys here. So obviously, this is going to be a UV dependent. So we do have to stack these UV shells properly. So what I'll go ahead and do here is take these, right, and just lay them out straight. And pretty much how these are laid out is actually how they're going to project onto this flag. And I'll expand the UV editor here. Double click each shell here. And what we can do, just like I do in my modeling videos, you could actually snap the pivot here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit D, right? And then V, and we can hold down V here just to snap to this vert. Alternatively, we could actually just click edit pivot here, right? And allow us to move the pivot around. And if we hold V, there it is, right? So now we could access the move tool, hold down V again, and we snap there, right? So now I'm just going to give this guy a little bit of offset, take this guy here again, go to UV, double click, edit pivot, hold down V, snap to the bottom here, move tool, hold down V again, snap there, give it a little bit of an offset, and now looks like I can't spell because this actually needs to be swapped. So you guys just did not see that. So I'm going to put these guys like this. Just take my UVs, just scale them down. Select the flag here. I'll put them right about the middle here. Go back in object mode. And there we go, right? So this flag or this text is right in the middle of the flag. Actually, the scale of the object shouldn't matter. So even if we go back in here and make this huge, as long as the spacing on the UVs is actually proper, this is actually going to project on to this size onto the flag. One thing that I'm going to do here is actually delete the history on both objects, and then also freeze the transforms. And now I'll go ahead and select the flag here. I'll close the UV editor, shift click this, which is the text. So basically you want to select the influence object first, and then whatever is being projected onto that influence object secondly. And then from here, we'll go to Mesh, Transfer Attributes, and Options. I'll go ahead and reset this. The only things that you have to change from the default is the vertex positions. You want to set that to on. And then the attributes, we want to use the UVs, right? We want to use that spacing that we have in the UV editor. And once that's set, we'll hit transfer. So our text is beautifully projected onto this flag. And if you wanted a little bit of an offset here, what we should be able to do is go in here, and then we'll go ahead and just delete the history again. And I'm doing that via just a shortcut. But if you go to edit, delete by type, You see that Maya already gives you a default shortcut, which is Alt-Shift-D. And then from this point, I can just select all the verts and then just do Control middle mouse click. And that's just going to pull off on the normal. It just gives me this subtle offset. And then if you wanted some thickness, you can just go and select all these border edges here. And then you can do the extrude option. And then just give this some thickness here. And now if we kill the wireframe, you see that we have this nice little text applied to our flag. And we could even take this further and we could just combine this and add one more deformer here. So I'll go to Deform and then we'll apply the almighty bend, nonlinear bend. Again, we'll go ahead and take this handle here. So what I like to do here is give it some curvature, and I'm actually just going to flip this guy here like so. And I held down J to snap to 15-degree increments. Now I have this going the right way. So I could give this more curvature, and then I can go in here, and if I start moving the deformer, see I get a nice little sag here. So I'll go in here once more, delete the history, and then just hide the grid. So in this example, we use the UV layout to actually deform this text onto the flag, and here is our finished result. So that's all the time that I have for you. Thank you so much for watching this weird 3D modeling tricks for Maya. As always, let me know how I did in the comment section down below. Make sure to smash the like button, and please consider sharing this with any 3D artists that might find value in the information. Until we meet again, folks, I will catch you next time.